signature weapon systems are inherently predatory. At their core, they're an excuse to profit off yet another limited item with their exclusivity, adding an extra layer of FOMO to an already morally questionable genre. But why do modern gachas still implement such a system? Is it becoming more problematic? And if they are, how? To understand the situation of today, it's important to break down the weapon system as a whole regarding modern gachas. In these games, notably the ones known as the Big Four, it is standard for characters to not only be categorized by element, but also by weapon type. For example, in both Genshin and Wuthering Waves, this is directly expressed by different weapons such as swords, guns, polearms, and many more. Each character is assigned a weapon they are tied to. A sword character is locked to only using swords, and gun characters may only wield guns. In Honkai Star Rail, weaponry is replaced with paths, and characters can only equip light cones that match their path. Zenless Zone Zero takes a similar approach where agent type must match the type of the W engine they equip, else they lose all the weapon's special effects. While weapon classification systems do allow for a variety in gacha games, creating uniqueness among characters, the way these systems are executed is predatory, both limiting the amount of potential weapons a character would have access to, as well as creating an artificial need for more monetized content. This, of course, is the signature weapon. Gacha games operate on limited time banners. A character is available for a few weeks via in-game currency, which can also be purchased with real money. Afterwards, they're replaced with a new character, and the cycle repeats. This system is designed to create FOMO, as missing out could mean waiting months or even years for the character to rerun. Of course, these games are mapped out such that a free-to-play or even a moderate spender won't obtain enough currency to reliably pull even a single copy of each character, incentivizing players to spend real money to make up for that difference. While I do enjoy gacha games myself despite this, it's undeniable that this system is easily abused and is why the genre carries such a bad reputation. But what if I told you it doesn't end there? That there's another, entirely separate piece of the puzzle needed to complete the already hard-to-obtain character. This is where signature weapons come in. Along with the limited character banner, there's a separate weapon banner running concurrently that shares the same currency. These weapons are designed with the intention to synergize perfectly with the corresponding character, often offering exceptional boosts compared to other non-limited options. Now, Sigs do have the merit of showing dedication to a character and an avenue to further strengthen them if desired, but considering how expensive a character is to obtain by itself, averaging around a couple hundred or so US dollars, tying power to an additional, almost just as pricey weapon makes things messy fast. It's alarmingly common, especially for more recently released units, to have a character overly reliant on their signature weapon, which can manifest in a multitude of ways. The simplest way is just to have an insane difference in numbers between the signature and the free-to-play or non-limited alternative. This is fairly common, to name a few: Hoshimi Miyabi, Evelyn Chevalier, Hugo Vlad, Sani, and Maide are all characters that have been released in the last half year or so that suffer from this problem. The more common way to create a reliance on signature weapons is to design characters that have features of their kits tied to their sig that are otherwise unobtainable. Trigger's W engine is not only a massive damage boost from the next best option, but also contains a sizable defense shred, a feature that arguably should be in her base kit. Aglaya's signature light cone gives base speed, and equipping it is the only way to viably unlock her strongest playstyle, in which she becomes fast enough to lap Sunday twice. Brant's signature sword is the only sword in the game that allows him to run his ideal echo set, meaning if you don't spend currency for a sig, you're effectively locked out of optimal equipment. And now, we're seeing something even worse. Something developers have begun implementing only recently. Purposely creating characters that are gated from previously strong free-to-play options. To elaborate, in Honkai Star Rail and ZZZ, this manifests in the creation of new weapon categories. HSR and ZZZ, versions 3.0 and 2.0 respectively, added the Remembrance Path and the Rupture Agent type. Since these classifications were completely new, you were unable to use any of the previously existing light cones or W engines, gating weapons that would have been solid choices. In HSR, the new path made especially little sense. The new mechanic featured with the Remembrance was arguably not innovative enough to warrant the creation of a new path, as well as the fact that each newly released Remembrance character could have easily belonged to a different path. Aglaya was functionally identical to a Destruction unit, Casterus in Erudition, and Hyacinth in Abundance. However, they could not access the light cones associated with those paths simply because of the new system. It would be a different story if Hoyoverse released a plethora of good non-limited light cones, but it has been 4 months since Aglaya's release, and there has yet to be a gacha cone that surpasses even the 3-star cone. Casterus and Yishren, on the other hand, have such an atrocious collection of non-paid weapons that their next best, and very noticeably worse, choices are weapons from a completely different path just for the base stats on them. This is completely unreasonable and has never been the case for any previous character. Wuthering Waves isn't innocent either. Far from it. Let's take the latest characters, Chacona and Cardathea, who were tailor-made for each other. Chacona and Cardathea are gun and sword users respectively, which initially sounded promising as those two weapon types had the best accessible non-limited alternatives, that being Static Mist for the gun and Emerald of Genesis for the sword. These two weapons were reliable, having been sufficient alternatives for most gun and sword users due to their rare crit rate stats and universally desired attack buffing. Static Mist was especially notable on supportive gun units, like Chacona, due to the fact that it could increase your main DPS's attack. However, all of this was rendered irrelevant by a single aspect of Cardathea's kit. She was an HP scaler. Attack was effectively useless on her. This meant that she couldn't benefit from Static Mist's buff, nor the high base attack and attack buffing from Emerald of Genesis. If you wanted to make Chacona and Cardathea function properly as a team, you now had to pull for both of their signature weapons, one to provide a usable buff, and the other to give Cardathea the stats she actually needs, and this is still ignoring the raw difference in damage between Chacona's weapon choices. In conclusion, this leads to very polarizing results between having signature weapons and not, more so than we've ever seen before in Wuthering Waves. However, to be fair, the problem could be alleviated if there were other options that fulfilled the purpose of the limited weapons, but that is a separate issue that could deserve its own video. No matter the method, the end result is the same. Without signature weapons, characters feel underwhelming at best, if not just outright terrible, leading to polarizing results between owning and not owning the Sig. This extreme dichotomy might even lead players that can't afford to spend lots of real money to skip entire characters they would have otherwise gotten. For me personally, this was the deciding factor why I didn't pull Hugo Vlad. The sheer difference in numbers was too much for me to justify getting him. Now, some will argue that these problems are overblown, as even without their signature weapon, most characters can still clear the endgame content in their respective games just fine. It will just take a bit of extra effort. However, this notion completely misses the point. Players should not feel as if they're a missing part of their character if they opt to skip their weapon, especially given how expensive the character is by themselves. Not getting that one-turn ultimate as Rappa feels terrible. Having to reset the run because your Xiao missed the crit due to a missing Sig is irritating. Witnessing Evelyn's chain attacks hit significantly weaker than they should is unsatisfying. It has become a point where not having a character Sig greatly affects the experience of playing said character. Furthermore, it's worth mentioning that there are also instances where a character struggles to clear at all without their signature, but in my opinion, this is more of a power creep issue than the weapon system's fault. Okay, what now? How should these games fix their weapon system? Is it possible to design a non-predatory, free-to-play signature weapon? Well, as established before, non-predatory signature weapons don't exist. That's like the idea of a non-predatory trillion-dollar company. The concept itself is predatory, incentivizing profit maximization at the expense of the consumer. However, it's not like Hoyoverse and Koro games can simply throw away this core part of the game system. If a gacha game must or insist on implementing signature weapons, what should they do to make these weapons at least reasonable? There's no perfect way to define a reasonable signature weapon, but a good rule of thumb is that its performance does not differ drastically from a free-to-play or at minimum, non-limited gacha option. As an example, let's take Jingren's signature light cone. Now, what this light cone does is that it increases Jingren's damage. What? You expected it to do something else? Maybe because nowadays signature light cones consist of perks such as advancing your action forward, inflicting debuffs, filling up your energy for otherwise impossible to reach breakpoints, giving stats unobtainable elsewhere, skill point generation, taunt value increase, and much more. On the other hand, Jingren's signature weapon is one I would deem healthy for the game as it merely provides a damage increase, and not by too much compared to free-to-play or 4-star options. Additionally, Xingren's Lycone was universally strong, at least at its time. You could use it on any release date erudition character for a marginal increase, and even save it for future limited erudition characters due to its flexibility, which, in a way, allowed you to get away with saving your pulls by skipping future weapons. This allowed the Lycone to still benefit the player, while also remaining far from a necessity. Alright, so what should we make of all this? At the end of the day, signature weapons are just part of a plethora of issues present in modern gacha games, and they may only get worse from here. From a consumer perspective, the only way to push for meaningful change is through collective recognition and feedback. Unfortunately, gacha communities also have a reputation of tolerating, if not outright defending, predatory practices, which makes any hope for reform uncertain. Thank you for watching till the end. Until next time!